That's what they want to know. They've been ignored, apparently, by state and federal prosecutors to some extent and by politicians who claim that they have their backs. And so they want to know, why are we being silenced? Why are you not hearing us? And I think when President Trump called them a hoax, they had had enough. That was the final straw, and that led to the press conference. And one reason why you haven't heard a lot from them recently is that Virginia Giuffre, who was the survivor who spoke out the most, she committed suicide recently, and that left a conspicuous void since then. And now, from that press conference, you see that new survivor voices are speaking up, and that's bad news for President Trump, because it means that this controversy is not going away. I mean, you even had Marjorie Taylor Greene at that press conference, who's one of the most loyal Trump supporters, and so it had to be extra annoying for the president, and it shows until they release the files, this thing's only going to get worse.
Yeah, and also Virginia Giuffre posthumously has a book coming out, released, I think, October, November, chronicling her story. Meantime, Emily, look, these stories are so moving. Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace emerged from a survivors meeting in tears. Then you had Congresswomen Boebert and Green joining the cause. What impact did survivors have on both Republicans and Democrats?
Yeah, I think that from what they said, you know, that was a bipartisan meeting from House Oversight Committee of Republicans and Democrats, closed door for over 2 hours. Speaker Johnson, and sort of a show of Republicans doing something on this issue, was in that meeting for that entire meeting. And everybody who left said it was very emotional. There were tears. And I think that it reinvigorated for some, you know, the importance of wanting to get to the bottom of some of this. And I think for, you know, a lot of the Republicans who are looking into this, it showed them like maybe how deep things go. There has been a lot of material from the Epstein case and the Maxwell case that has shown, you know, the extent to what they did. But a lot of what the survivors are looking for are the people who were surrounding this operation, who knew things that didn't speak up. And getting to the bottom of that is going to probably take a bit more digging than I think some Republicans were expecting.
And Megan, Trump in his social media rant says the Democrats don't really care about survivors, adding they're leaning on the Epstein case for political gain. But survivors emphasize the bipartisan nature of this scandal. What are the political risks as the push to release names is gaining momentum?
Well, if Democrats were leaning on this, they would have released the files during the Biden administration, but they, you know, have respect for due process and the rule of law, because Ghislaine Maxwell was going through an appeal, so they did not do that when they knew that Trump's name was in these files already. But I don't think that there's a lot of political risk here. I think these campaign ads against these Republicans are actually writing themselves. They're protecting pedophiles. They're protecting child traffickers. I mean, these women were abused, and now there's faces to this massive allegation, and there's nothing more humanizing than seeing these women give this press conference.
And Mara, I want to play what one survivor says was Epstein's top brag. Let's watch.
His biggest brag forever was that he was very good friends with Donald Trump. He had an 8x10 framed picture of him on his desk with the two of them. Like, they were very close.
So the White House has said that Trump broke off his friendship with Epstein, kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago for, quote, being a creep. Is this former friendship influencing Trump's decisions on releasing the files?
I think it's certainly getting under his skin. I mean, we've seen the emotional reaction from the president from the start of this, where he was defiant, shifting blame, and now to call it a hoax is just belittling to those women who were brave enough to step forward and put themselves out there and tell their stories. And I actually think with the press conference, one of the most you know, aside from the stories from the survivors themselves, was when Marjorie Taylor Greene explained why they hadn't come forward before, why they hadn't released names before, because of the threats that they were under and the amount of legal fees they'd be, you know, swallowed by from these people who are on these lists or who are friends of Jeffrey Epstein's, who, you know, would dominate them in the courts. And so this is where they are saying enough is enough. Marjorie Taylor Greene and others have said they'll read the names themselves and face those repercussions, because they want that transparency. Because again, for Republicans who ran on accountability, transparency, this flies in the face of it. And I do think that Donald Trump knows that. And so shifting blame and calling it a hoax is the tool he uses most often. But I don't see it working this time.
So, Dave, what is the significance of House Oversight staffers getting access to the unredacted documents this next week? I mean, what might they see, and how can that information be helpful to their investigation?
Well, it depends on how many documents they get access to, because the Department of Justice has given the committee some, but not all the documents. And so of the documents they're going to see, I think it'll be important about the birthday card that Trump says is a hoax. Well, they'll get to see if it's in the file and if it's real or not. But the thing that everyone wants to know are the names of unindicted co-conspirators. I'm not sure if the staffers are going to get access to that. And that's the crux here of this issue, because the MAGA base has been told they will get a client list of Epstein. The client list does not exist, but the files exist, and the names of unindicted co-conspirators are in the files. So until that's released, this controversy is not going away. And so it is important if they get the names of those co-conspirators inside the House committee. But then the question is, will they make those names public? I don't think they will, as long as President Trump is in the White House.
But, Dave, could any of those co-conspirators, people's names, could these people be indicted now?
I think it's very unlikely. There's statute of limitations issues. There's witness memory issues. I think it's unlikely also because the Department of Justice, when the #2 person, Todd Blanche, interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell, they didn't do that as a way to get information on unindicted co-conspirators. That was a way to exonerate President Trump.
If their stories can't move enough Republicans to join this discharge effort, what will?
I mean, I have to say, we spent a couple of hours with the survivors on Monday in a closed-door meeting, and to hear the chilling, harrowing stories that these women survived. I mean, we're talking about children who were as young as 12, 13, 14 years old, who not only were raped, but they were drawn into a sex trafficking ring in which they were farmed out to Jeffrey Epstein's associates. I think when you hear these stories, when you understand the criminal enterprise that was involved in this case, that there are potentially thousands of survivors out there, that there was international sex trafficking, there were financial institutions, the FBI, the CIA involved in this case, and a miscarriage of justice. This is not just about a few isolated events. This is about a vast network of criminal enterprise that implicates not only Epstein, but his friends, his associates. And we have to understand that Donald Trump was Epstein's one of his closest friends for over a decade. And so we have serious questions about what Donald Trump is covering up, what is in those files. But if they won't release those files, we will subpoena every person involved, the bank records, and we have to believe these survivors. Their stories are bone-chilling. And as they told us, follow the money, because it's in the receipts.
Well, NBC News confirms that on Monday, some Oversight Committee staffers will view unredacted documents from the Epstein estate in New York, which may include that birthday book, which reportedly includes a somewhat explicit letter from President Trump. Will you be part of that group? When might you see some of these unredacted documents? And what does the committee hope to find in them?
Yeah, so House Democrats forced a vote in the Oversight Committee to subpoena documents both from the administration and the Epstein estate. And so the document production that will happen on Monday is from the estate itself. Now, redactions are allowed to protect survivors and minors. And so the counsel for the committee will travel to New York City to ensure that that is the only thing redacted in those files, because it's important to understand that the Epstein estate is still managed by two of the individuals who were involved in Epstein's affairs for his entire career as many of these activities were going on. Those documents will be transmitted to us electronically as members of the committee, and we'll be reviewing those on Monday.
You know, Speaker Mike Johnson called the whole discharge petition, quote, superfluous after Republicans approved a measure encouraging the Oversight Committee to continue its investigation, and said the discharge doesn't adequately protect victims. So what's your response to Johnson? Are victims not being protected?
Well, the victims or survivors themselves stood on the steps of Capitol Hill the same day and said, we want these records released. And the discharge petition has very clear language in it that will protect survivors and anyone who needs their identity protected for safety reasons. So it's laughable. But it's very clear that the Speaker of the House is Donald Trump's guy on the inside. He is engaging in a cover-up to protect the president and whatever it is that the president does not want the public to see in those files.
Do you ultimately expect there will be more names released this week?
Let me just put it this way. The names are out there. All you have to do is Google Jeffrey Epstein and his enterprise and the people who were associated with him. I think we know some of those names, including some of the most powerful people at the top. What we are trying to make sure the American people have access to is the criminal investigations that went on and the sweetheart deals that the Justice Department gave to Epstein and his associates, and justice for the survivors by prosecuting individuals who were never held accountable.
Trump's DNA, his fingerprints are all over this, and that's why they're getting desperate. There's a reason why dumb MAGA Mike, the ostensive Speaker of the House, but really, he doesn't have any power because the House doesn't matter anymore. Trump is Speaker, or I guess maybe Elon, he was Speaker for a while before Trump exiled him. Mike is going around pushing this idea that Trump was secretly undercover. This doesn't make any sense. We've talked about it, right? But it shows the desperation. That means his fingerprints, his DNA are all over this. And they are extra desperate. Because let's remember what happened here. He said he was going to release everything. And then he said he wouldn't do it. And actually, the official narrative was accurate. And then this blew up into a massive scandal as both Democrats and many MAGA Republicans started turning on Trump and his administration. And then just a few days ago, do you remember this? Trump came out and said the entire thing is a big, giant Democratic left-wing hoax. That they are making up this whole Epstein stuff specifically to demonize him and to demonize conservatives. And then a day or two after that, the narrative shifts and says, actually, it's not a hoax. It's not a hoax at all. It's all extremely very, very, very real, and Donald Trump was an undercover FBI agent for the thing that was supposedly a hoax a couple days ago, but now it's very real, and it just so happens that he was just there to get the bad guys. But the actual people are making it clear that Trump knows a lot and he's not saying it, and they're getting ready to make their own list. And guys, there is no chance, there's none, not a single chance in the world that Donald Trump was an undercover agent. At the very best case for him, he was in many of these spaces but didn't overlap with the true evil, but probably saw hints of it and said nothing. Medium scenario is he saw it go down and was a willing bystander to horrific actions. And I don't need to say what the worst case scenario is, but that he was alongside his pal Jeff every step of the way. Now, we don't know which one is which. We don't know. But I guarantee you the undercover agent stuff isn't true. And his fingerprints and DNA are all over this case. And that's why they're hiding it.